Well, after the assassination of Charlie Kirk, President Trump announced plans to label Antifa as a major terrorist organization. It's known for its violent left-wing protests.
We're going to do a big thing with respect to Antifa. Antifa causes tremendous incitement, and the things they say and the things they do are horrible.
Antifa is an ideology in large part, but it's also true that there are groups that organize themselves and call themselves Antifa, right? They march and chant Antifa. They have black bloc as basically their uniform. So I do think that there's a way to go after them as a group.
Let's bring in former FBI Special Agent Nicole Parker. Nicole, thanks for being with us today. So the president wants to go after Antifa. They are to be designated as a domestic terrorist organization. What are the problems you see with this designation?
Well, first of all, just talking about Antifa, I think the term is thrown out in general terms quite often, especially since the summer of 2020, when we saw those awful protests and riots that overtook our nation for months. So Antifa really, how it's different from other domestic terrorist organization groups is that it's very decentralized. There's no particular leader. There's no membership requirements. It is really like smaller networks that are set up all across the country. And so, first of all, the decentralization of the movement does make it more difficult. I also think it's important to note that you're right. These tend to be the far left individuals. They are usually anarchists, communists, socialists. They are anti-capitalists. And so it's very different than when you hear about the foreign terrorist organization groups, right? Like ISIS, Al-Qaeda. Those are actually designated by the State Department. And so for the domestic terrorist organization groups, those are not formally designated. They are not designated by the State Department. And so it's a very different set of circumstances that you're looking at. I think it's also important to note, John, that federally, there are obviously federal statutes for foreign terrorist organization groups. On the federal level, there is no domestic terrorism statute. And so usually, let's say the FBI is doing an investigation involving domestic terrorism. You will have to go in and find an actual statute. A lot of times it's hate crime, violent crime, things of that sort. Those sort of statutes would be what you would charge if you're doing a domestic terrorist type of investigation, as opposed to the foreign terrorist organizations. They have actual statutes that the feds use to charge them. It's also important to note that on the state level, there are 32 states and DC that do have state laws that criminalize domestic terrorism. So there are a lot of things that you're looking at, but when you're asking what the difficulties would be, I think the lack of the centralized structure, and that, you know, these groups kind of offshoot all over the country. Different countries have different Antifa groups, but there is a commonality. A lot of them tend to be involved in things like protests, doxing, violence. And so I think with the assassination of Charlie Kirk, it is of importance to President Trump that something like this never occurs again. And I don't think that President Trump is saying directly, yes, this was caused by Antifa. That is not what President Trump says. I think in light of what this horrible tragedy was that never should occur in America, we should never, ever be using violence to solve our grievances. I think it's a precautionary and a strong measure. President Trump is coming out and being very proactive and saying, going forward, we will look at Antifa as a domestic terrorist type group.
All right, but the suspect in the Charlie Kirk assassination, there's no suggestion or evidence that I'm aware of that he was an Antifa member. He was very much a lone wolf. Would this effort going after Antifa, could it in any way have stopped what happened to Charlie?
That's a great question. And again, I want to clarify. I don't think President Trump made a direct line and said this person was part of Antifa. I did not hear President Trump say that. Like I was saying, I think he's proactively taking measures to those that may want to cause or incite violence on the left side. Look, we are going to look strongly into this. And I think also, having worked for the FBI, when you get a directive, I can tell you in the summer of 2020, I was not aware of really any investigations into the riots and the protests and the violence from the summer of 2020. That really wasn't something that we ever heard about happening at the FBI. In fact, we heard of cases that were immediately shut down by federal prosecutors that many FBI agents thought should have been worked. And so I think it's really just putting out a message. Political violence is not going to be tolerated, no matter who it's caused by, whether it's a lone offender or whether it's Antifa or whoever it might be. On either side of the political spectrum, it is unacceptable. And this is not the way that we should be living in this nation. There should be no room or place for that. Charlie Kirk's assassination never should have happened. It cannot happen again on either side of the political spectrum.
National Police Association says there were 574 violent riots in this country in 2020. More than 2,000 people hurt. One ex-police officer, David Dorn, was killed, and more than $2 billion in damage. Nicole Parker, we have to leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, it's Will Cain. Click here to subscribe to the Fox News channel on YouTube. It's the best way to get our latest interviews and highlights. And click to subscribe to the Will Cain podcast for full episodes right now.